Hey, we're live. It's question and answer time. All right, cool.
Hello and welcome. We thought we'd have a short question and answer session for anybody who's here live in the building, and also for you guys who are out there on the in the whatever sphere. Seems to be 159 people have been looking at it so far. Anyway, so has anybody got any technical or we're not giving marriage guidance, but
nice to have spoken to you.
So if anybody's got any questions about the bases or the way that we make them, or anything about anything that goes into the instruments, then here we go.
Kick off if you want, Chris.
Yeah.
In terms of the sound, what would you say is the most critical part of the manufacturing process in terms of precision, or just that fine line between acceptable and not acceptable?
Well, that's more than one question in a way. The sound itself comes from the wood. I mean, the resonance of the instrument is where the tonality of the instrument starts, if you like. I mean, resonance, or the way that the materials at the instrument absorb or transmit the frequencies that the string produces, basically, is what gives you the tone. So therefore, a soft material will absorb a different set of frequencies than a hard material. So obviously, the traditional lutherie woods are chosen because of their resonant frequency, or the frequency at which they absorb and transmit certain frequencies. If you give you, that's really where the sound comes from. I mean, pickups and electronics aren't. They're the conduit of the sound. You know, they transmit the sound. Obviously, they can be the sound can be modified en route. You know, which is what EQ is all about. And the components themselves will affect the sound of an instrument. You know, so I mean, if you're using a high impedance pickup and you're using a long cable, you'll lose some top end along the cable, because that's what happens. You know, because the cable absorbs some of the sound. But the fundamental thing really is choosing materials that obviously they need to have engineering qualities, so therefore they've got to be strong enough to support the strings and be stable and all that sort of thing. But the combinations of wood that you use within the instrument gives you the tone of the instrument. So I mean, if you wanted an instrument that was dominant in mid-range, for instance, then you'd use in the body materials like walnut or mahogany, which tend to emphasize that end of it. If you want something that's got a more kind of high produced sound with maybe a bit more scooped out in the middle but with a bit more top and bottom, then something like lighter weight ash or alder, for instance, or poplar would give you something. And depending on the weight of, even within specific types of timber, weight will affect the tonality of the instrument. So I mean, if you have a heavy piece of mahogany or a heavy piece of ash, it will sound different to a lighter piece, or the variant weights of the and also the grain structure. You know, so that, I mean, it's a big subject really. And the hardware and that sort of thing will have an effect. So, you know, a brass bridge will sound different to an aluminium bridge. And scale length and strings, and you know, it's endless really.
And then you've got the construction as well, so how they're put together. We've been playing around with neck pockets recently, so we kind of offer one range of bases that's a through neck, and then we've got two types of bolt-on necks. One that's kind of like a standard Fender kind of neck pocket, where the pocket just fits into the neck just fits into a pocket, and then we've got a second kind of neck pocket where the neck is actually pushed into
an extended
where it runs all the way back to the pickup basically, and it's actually pushed in, so it's got a really tight fit, and we kind of find that they're quite a bit brighter and a lot more sustained than kind of just a normal.
It's got more transference into the body. I mean, a through neck, because you've got the strings attached to the same piece of wood at both ends, then it's transmitting the energy back up and down the string. And it's not just about sustain, it's also about, you know, the thing we were saying before about the transference of the frequencies as well. And you know, and a loose joint will lose more of that energy. It is really about energy as it goes back to the chords.
Okay, we have a Facebook question.
Right.
Ash Kimber says, I saw you tried a fan fret model a few months ago. Was it a success, and do you see yourselves doing them more regularly?
Yeah, it did. It was a nice. It worked really well.
It did work. It was a relatively conservative fan fretting. What was the scale?
Yeah,
what was the scale length?
The scale length was only 33 on the bottom and 35 on the top, I think.
Or bottom and top, physically rather than
on the bass side it was 35, on the treble side it was 33.
So it was 2 inches difference between.
So a lot of the fan fretted stuff out there is sometimes it's from 38 down to 32, so the fanning is really
enormous.
quite severe.
Yeah.
So for us, I think it was a success in the way that it was quite subtle, and it was really
it did. It was surprising. I mean, I'd tried fan fretted instruments before, and I had been quite surprised by how playable some of them were. And obviously it does help with getting a balance from string to string, so that the tension, you're always the more strings you have, the more you're fighting against the opposition of tension. So that if you have an instrument, a 6-string for instance, you know, in order to get the B string really tight and resonant, and so it works all the way up, you want a longer scale length. But equally, for a C string or a high F or something like that, that string's becoming very tight. If you take it even at 34, it's quite tight. So if you can reduce it at one end, it does help. It's a whole different technical demands, you know. I mean, Martin had fun getting the nut to work and how the headstock angle worked and all that sort of thing. So there are a lot of technical challenges in it, but it's certainly not something that we would say that we wouldn't do again.
Fantastic.
Anybody else?
Yeah, following on from the kind of weight really we're talking about.
Yeah.
And I know there's a kind of crafty wood folk thing about using wood all the time, but have you ever considered using any different materials? I was asking because I've got a seriously bad back and I've had 22 overwater basses, as you know. It's about time I had an even lighter one.
We're going to go down an extra.
I mean, there are ways of making instruments. I mean, I haven't built instruments out of anything but wood and metal, and we occasionally use graphite or carbon fibre as reinforcing material. Personally, I mean, I don't think actually making you know, the sort of going the graphite moulded route is particularly lighter anyway. I mean, I think the ways of reducing weight in instruments are cavities. You can hollow out an instrument.
But you get that neck heavy kind of problem.
Well, that's down to really the design of the instrument. I mean, if something starts, its balance is not just about the weight of the neck and the weight of the body. It's also it's how it sits on your knee or how it hangs around your neck. Yeah. So therefore, the shape of the body and the point at which the strap is attached to the top horn affects the balance of the instrument as well, isn't it?
Are those long horns on there? Is that for a purpose?
Well, on a standard instrument, the ideal is that you get the top end of the strap button somewhere around the 12th fret. Right. I mean, obviously on a single-sided headstock, and if you're using bigger machine heads, then that extends the weight farther to the left, as it were, or right if you're left-handed. It is about balance as much as anything else. So therefore, if you were to make the body lighter, you might have to make it longer. I mean, obviously that's partly what the headless thing is about. You know, people who you know, you can get tuners that work at the other end.
Sure.
And they do work fairly efficiently. And part of that is aesthetic as well. It's also, you know, it's a bit easier to change strings on a traditional machine head than it is on one of those. But you know, you can, but it does affect the sound. If
Sure.
in the same resonant thing, you know, that, I mean, there are people, and we have done it. We've hollowed out instruments.
Yeah, we made a chambered.
We have made chambered. We've made chambered instruments. And there are some manufacturers who specialise in making chambered bodies. You know, they will honeycomb almost the inside of the body. But it doesn't sound, I'm not saying it sounds worse, but it doesn't sound the same. And you've got to have a certain amount of structural integrity. Obviously, you need a solid bit through the middle pretty well to stop the thing collapsing. But you can reduce weight by cutting cavities into places that aren't affecting the structure of the wood. And I think that's even then, by using the same timbers, you will still get that sort of sound. So I mean, if you hollow out a piece of mahogany, it will sound closer to a mahogany guitar than if you hollow out a piece of ash. You know, so it's
Well, the lime, the two basses back, or 2 and 3 basses back, you made them of lime for me.
Yeah.
With a walnut facing on one of the flame ash, I think, on the other.
Yeah.
And they're much, much lighter. And I've just got the swamp ash P bass, as you know, and it is a bit weightier. It's a bit bulkier.
Yeah.
And I'm keenly interested to know if I can have one of those that was half the weight.
I mean, you could. So you could. I mean, the thing about the sort of P-bass shape is that it is a bigger body.
Yeah, sure.
It's and they tend to be slightly thicker, and you've got bigger machine heads and a longer headstock and all that stuff, which all adds weight to it.
Sure.
I mean, I think in yours we used carbon fibre in the neck as reinforcing to reduce it a bit.
Yeah.
But there is something about physical size. You know, you can.
One of my early
There's
ones
always
was
a
sitting
compromise.
over there, and there's no wonder I've got a bad back, really. That is a heavy bass. It's very pretty, but it's very heavy.
Yeah. Well, that's nearly all mahogany, and that'll be the old Brazilian mahogany, which is now virtually illegal.
Oh, is it?
Which was much more dense than the mahogany we can get now, which is mostly plantation grown Central American stuff, which is about half the weight,
Right.
or a third less weight
But
anyway.
is it something you think about all the time, really?
Oh yeah,
That's the
so
question.
it's something people ask about.
We've become very conscious of it, I think, certainly even over the last couple of years, I think we've become more conscious
More
of
so.
weight, especially with kind of the J and P style instruments, because they do have a bigger body and bigger headstocks. So
But it's still nicer than that.
And I mean, I think one of the things also that we've messed about with. I mean, I touched on, and this is going back in a way to the tonality. I mean, it all comes down to tone. I mean, at the end of the day, the whole point of the whole thing is sound and setup. So it's playability and the noise that comes out of it, and things like scale length and things like that, which affect the physical presence of the instrument. I mean, some people struggle maybe with a 35-inch scale because their left hand is farther away from them, and the position along, you know, the sort of muscle memory thing, and the position of where they are on the neck alters. So they want a shorter scale, but the first reaction with something that's tuned below E is that the longer the scale length, the purer the note tends to be, because you can also use a lighter gauge string to get the same note and still maintain the tension, and then therefore you'll get the harmonic content of the note more easily on a lighter weight string than you will on a heavyweight string. And therefore it will sound more even up the neck, because that's the other thing about that sort of thing. You know, if you're playing, it's not just those bottom few notes that you're looking for, it's also the having more notes in a fistful, as it were, farther up in the neck, and making those notes sound even with the scale length. So size comes into that, which again affects weight, which again affects balance, and you know the whole thing is and one of the things that we've been working on recently is a lot more shorter scale instruments, and as I say, it's less critical with a instrument that's tuned from E to G. You can go down to 32, 30 inch, and you can get away with it, and the instrument will work and resonate. But as soon as you try and go lower than that, you do start to hit problems. So, but one of the things that we've been experimenting with recently is the use of through-body stringing. Now, I was never particularly convinced by through-body stringing on normal 34-inch scale 4-string basses.
But it works better on a short.
On a shorter scale, it suddenly seems to have an effect. It seems to add tension and resonance, and that sharper neck break, bridge, the angle that you've got the string over, is pulled through the body. And also, I think the extra string length. Now, I don't, to be honest with you, I've thought about this for 20 years, 30 years probably. I don't understand how a longer string seems to add tension, but for some reason it does. I mean, from a physics point of view, you would think it wouldn't because there's more material to stretch. But somehow, you do seem to move, and we recently strung up a through-body strung 33-inch scale 5-string with a low B on it, with extra stiffening in the neck. And it sounded pretty good, and it actually felt not bad, and with a slightly heavier string on. But it's all those things. So I mean, as I say, even after all these years, you're still learning and looking and reacting to what other people are looking for. So maybe the hollow P bass, which is not, I mean, I'm sure it's been done. I'm positive it's been done. And
it's still the hollow Mustang.
Yeah, I mean, there's. Somebody mentioned that Dell Electros, I mean, they're basically made of hardboard and bits of 2B1, and they still kind of sound okay. So, I mean, I'm not sure a 5-string version would ring very well, but, anyway, yes.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a few Facebook questions.
Okay.
There's one mega long question we'll come to in a second. First, a couple of quick questions. Neil McHardy says, can you raid your scrap bin for some nice bits of wood? Paul Barnes says, are you still making guitars or only basses?
I was going to ask that.
There's actually a guitar hanging on the wall there that's been part made for quite a long time.
Longer than I've been here.
But when was the last time we made a guitar?
It was for Ian's.
Oh yeah,
probably
yeah.
Like 5 years ago.
Yeah, actually, we haven't really made guitars in the last 4 or 5 years. In the olden days, I mean, I know Paul has one of our guitars. In fact, I think he's got two.
I've got one.
And you've got one. We used to make something like 30% guitars. I mean, I probably started making guitars. I'm going to show my age here. I made my first guitar when I was 14 in 1965 or something, and I made my first bass in 1967, which is nearly 50 years ago.
It's long, doesn't it?
But
It probably wouldn't help if I said I made my bass in about first bass in about 2000.
yeah, but we used to make something like 30%, 35% guitars, and it was a fairly regular thing. It just gradually, we've just concentrated on bass. One day, I keep saying, when I've figured out how to do it properly.
Okay, one more really quick one here. Piper McCain says, do you have any recommendations for a small amp that will go well with a 5-string Perception?
Go on. How small? This is the question.
Yeah.
It's one of the things. There's a huge budget bracket.
Yeah.
And so.
I'll give you a good suggestion. An Ampeg Micro CL.
Okay.
300 quid, 100 watts, fabulous sound.
Right. I mean, a lot of it is down to speaker cabinet size, isn't it? This is the problem that you always hit. I mean, we were involved with Euphonic Audio for a while, and they were really at the cutting edge of reducing the size of speaker cabinets by using transmission line, which basically gives you an internal, you know, it's not a ported cab in the normal sense, and it allows the pressure to even out within the cabinet. And that's the big problem you've got with bass cabinets, it's back pressure, because the lower frequencies and the slower moving of the speaker, the driver within the cabinet, affects things. And you know, amplifiers have become tiny. I mean, we can now got little digital amplifiers that you can put in your inside pocket. But cabinets are, I mean, who makes good small cabinets now?
Mark Van der
Yeah, Mark, who we are again associated with, makes excellent small cabinets.
Yeah, the 1B12s are good.
But I mean, on the mainstream, I mean, people like the Italian one, Mark Bass makes some very good, fairly flat response, small scale amplifiers. I mean, everybody is going smaller these days, and there are a lot more good small amps about.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to go for a big
Lawrence
question?
with Acoustic Image, wherever he is, has disappeared somewhere. I mean, they're worth looking at. I mean, they're really double bass amplifiers, but they're definitely worth looking at.